Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Christmas Lace Notes from the Lace Bee. This time I am pondering on the flavours of Christmas, a feast for the senses. Now, the tastes and smells can evoke a memory of Christmas past. I wrote last year around how sitting um, with my mother as she looked and sorted out the Brussels sprouts is a memory that comes back every time I boil them in the kitchen. Who would think that that would bring such a good memory back? And from the first bite of a mince pie to the smell of a Christmas cake cooking, we're drawn back into our childhoods and the thoughts of those we love. Now, when I was a child, my mum worked at a bakery, and it was a patisserie and bakery that was run by two wonderful people who grew up in Germany and Austria and brought with them the biscuits and bakes of their childhood. It was there that I first experienced mince pies with a melt in the mouth topping, which I later discovered was called Viennese well mince pie. They made little tiny biscuits that were beautiful as well, that you would buy by weight. And these were things that I didn't realise were strongly in both their traditions of German and Austrian baking, and also in the heritage as Jewish people as well. Although they were brought up Christian, there were still many bakes that they made that brought those back. Friday they always made challah bread, those lovely soft white loaves that were in the side with a deep brown outside that was plaited up. And to be honest, it was there that I got my love of bread making. Christmas is a time for family, it's a time for warmth and tradition, but it's also an opportunity to celebrate the diverse ways in which cultures across the world mark the festive season. We may be familiar with the roasts, puddings, the mince pies here in the UK, but the Christmas dinner table is very different from country to country. And it can give us a really lovely glimpse into the unique customs, flavours, and ingredients. So I want to explore some of those because as I've got to know people over the years, they've shared with me their traditions. From things such as just local traditions where my brother and my sister-in-law would often have to visit one or both sets of parents on Christmas Day and Boxing Day. They would actually cook their turkey on a Christmas Eve, so they still had their Christmas dinner together. To friends who would bring around food that they'd made that was to do with their tradition. So one of the things that I've seen come up recently in some of the films that I've been watching over the Christmas Movie A Day project has been the Italian one, which is the Feast of the Seven Fishes. Now, this is a Christmas Eve meal that's marked by, now I'm going to apologise now for my pronunciation of any word that is not basically in the English language, because let's face it, last time I tried to speak French in Paris, everyone thought I was Canadian, and I do apologise to the Canadian people to think that I speak French that badly. It's called La Vigilia. It's a seafood feast and is known as the Feast of the Seven Fishes. It's a dinner includes a variety of fish dish, each prepared differently. And the idea around this being that fish was something that was eaten on festivals when you couldn't have meat, often on saints' days and things like that. So it then became a big part of festivals moving forward. The seven is symbolic because it represents the number of sacraments in the Catholic Church, and from using bacala, which is a salt cod, to fried squid and anchovies, it's a celebrated meal as a highlight of the Italian Christmas season. It's mostly observed in southern Italy. Many Italian families in the UK enjoy the tradition too, and it brings an unmistakable aroma of fresh seafood on Christmas Eve. I know that Rick Stein, in some of his travels around Italy, has shown the use of bacala in there. So it's really worth having a look to see if there's any recipes out that you like. Do go and have a look on the blog if you've come straight through to this as a podcast, because there are links out to more information about this and some recipes I'm going to talk about. Moving on to Sweden, Julberg, the Christmas buffet. Now, Um, Christmas is not just a meal in Sweden, it's very much an event. The Julberg is a traditional Christmas buffet that spans multiple courses, and it's said to be quite something to see. From herring served in every conceivable style, pickled, cured, curried, mustard flavoured, to jalimpa, which is Christmas bread, and knackenbrot, which is a crisp bread. The Julberg is a feast that includes cold cuts, warm dishes, such as cabbage rolls, and obviously the traditional Swedish ham. It's very much often done as a smorgasbord. Now, in the UK, we tend to think of that as being something that came out here in the 70s that was basically a piece of bread cut in half and then fillings on the top. A smorgasbord is a lot more than that. And one mustn't forget glögg either, which is their version of the spice mulled wines that we find across the whole of Europe at this period. In Mexico, tamales and poncho navideño, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, navideño. These are interesting. Tamales are a proper dish made from corn dough and various fillings like chicken, pork, or even can be sweet, and very much a staple during the holiday season. They're wrapped in corn husks and steamed, and often enjoyed with a steaming cup of poncho navideño. Now, poncho is a warm fruit punch. It's made from a blend of seasonal fruits, spices, and sugar cane, and it's absolutely perfect for keeping away the chill and to enjoy with family and friends. Unlike the mulled wines of Europe, this is often a non-alcoholic version. So if you want to discover more about this, have a look at my blog. In Poland, Wigilia and the 12 dishes is very much a tradition. On Christmas Eve, families come together for Wigilia, a festive meal that's traditionally meatless, honouring the wait for Christ's birth. 12 dishes served to symbolise 12 apostles, and amongst them you'll find borschtniks, which is a beetroot soup with sour cream, pugli, which are dumplings filled with mushrooms or potatoes or sauerkraut, and often carp, which is often served as the main course. And for dessert, there's this sweet grain dish made with honey, poppy seeds and nuts called kutia, which adds a really lovely sweet touch to the evening's feast. In Romania, Samal or Koznak are very much traditions. Now, samal is a traditional dish of cabbage rolls filled with a mixture of minced pork, rice and spices, and often served as the centrepiece of the Christmas meal. That dish is a very much a labour of love, typically prepared in advance and slow cooked to perfection. Now, alongside the samal, Kozmak is a very much loved Romanian Christmas sweetbread, often filled with walnuts, cocoa, or Turkish delight even. It's a very rich, fragrant spread, and it's served warm with drinks like Chusha, which is a strong plum brandy to keep the cold winter nights at bay. There are various versions of this twisted bread, and I think last year a version of it was done on the Great British Bake Off, with having the traditional name from one of the other Eastern European countries associated with it. Now, South Africa, being an Antipodean country, as I like to remind my husband, he's an Antipodean, being an Australian, their Christmas is in the summer. I was talking to one of my colleagues today who said, yeah, it's like 30 degrees. And another colleague from South Africa was going to the beach for lunch. Me at 3 degrees was putting on a big jumper to go to the post office. So this means that most of the time the Christmas meals will take place outdoors. Now, the traditional outdoor eating is a braai in South Africa, which is a barbecue. Families will gather to cook meats such as Flavours, which is a type of sausage, steak and chicken. For sides, there's often potato salad, malva pudding, which is a sweet spongy cake, milk tart, a creamy dessert with a cinnamon dusting. And this laid-back, outdoorsy Christmas dining allows families to enjoy the warm weather and each other's company. It makes it a really unique and joyful experience. But something that's very traditionally South African and often done as a great comfort food is bubotti. It's a classic South African dish that's actually often served at Christmas time. Now, in Australia, where my husband is from, um, let's face it, um, those of us that grew up with the Foster's ads are convinced that no Christmas was complete in Australia without throwing another shrimp on the barbie, as all those ads used to tell us to do. For many Australians who miss the coldness of the Northern Hemisphere Christmas, they'll celebrate Christmas in July. And in one of my favourite episodes of Phryne Fisher, Murder Under the Mistletoe, she tries to escape for a quiet July-based Christmas in the Australian Alps, only to be confronted yet again by another murder. And as Australia's premier female sleuth, she obviously solves it quite quickly. So, as I mentioned, prawns are on the barbie as a common sight, along with roast lamb. Now, let's face it, Australians love lamb, and there's some fantastic videos from the Lamb Marketing Board in Australia around National Lamb Day, or as most people would call it in Australia, Australia Day, where they encourage people to have lamb. But cold salads and fruit platters are also another typical thing. And one popular dish, which is very much a key thing that Australians do love, is pavlova. That meringue that is so soft on the inside yet crisp on the outside, topped with fresh fruit, such as strawberries and kiwis. Or for the classic peach melba, you could have peach and raspberry sauce, named, of course, after that fabulous singer, Dame Nellie Melba. Many families will also enjoy Christmas ham, often served cold and paired with a variety of chutneys and relishes. And the festive season in Australia is marked by beach outings, family gatherings, and enjoying the sunny weather. Those of us who've watched Bondi Rescue know all about Christmas at the beach. Now, Germany, where I've spent many run up to Christmas for work in the past, two probably of the most famous things that they're known for Christmas foods is the Stollen and the Lebkuchen, those traditional little gingerbreads. Now, for Christmas treats that the bakery that my mum made up, I think Stollen and Lebkuchen are probably the two long-term favourites that I adored as a child and into adulthood. But as a celiac, these are two of the things I hunt down for gluten-free when I can. In 2-3 years ago, Shah brought out a Lebkuchen, which really does hark back to those of my childhood. It's that slightly yeasty, gingerbready, somewhere between a biscuit and somewhere between a cake, but smothered in chocolate. Traditionally, they're often smothered in a sort of icing sugar glaze or chocolate, and they might be filled with apple puree or jam in the centre. And for many years, when I was at the markets in Munich, I would look to find things I could have, such as Simstars, which are almond and cinnamon moulded into the shape of a star with a heavy royal icing topping to them. Back in 2007, we went to Cologne for the markets, and I have to say I really enjoyed finding all the different fruit that you can get there. I find Munich very bread heavy because it's traditionally in Bavaria, but Cologne was much more able to find more gluten-free goodies to bring home with us. In Germany, the festive season really is synonymous with that rich, fruity Stollen cake and those little gingerbreads. For me, Stollen is one of my biggest Christmas memories. It's a beautiful log of marzipan surrounded by dried fruits wrapped up in yeasted dough and then covered in icing or powdered sugar to resemble a swaddled baby. This look of it is supposed to be symbolic of the Christ child in the manger. When it's first cut, the stollen is soft and doughy, and then later the last pieces, as they start to dry out, can be cut thinly and toasted so they resemble a marzipan-laden tea cake, smothered in melted butter. So why is this particular memory so much in my brain? Um, this is because of my excellent great uncle George. Now, great uncle George was one of the kindest people I have ever known in my life. Um, he worked for the Hudson Bay Company. These days, it's not fashionable to have furs, but back in the 60s and 70s, very much that was his trade. And he and my aunt would go on fabulous cruises on the Queen Mary, QE2, and wine and dine different people in the fur industry. At his funeral, we were surprised to find three very glum-looking men turn up with some very um, conspicuous guards around them. It turns out they came from the Russian embassy, and they were to do with his dealing with sable. They didn't say much until the whiskey came out. But Uncle George would every Christmas get a Fortnum& Mason's hamper. I have always been obsessed with Fortnum& Mason's hampers from this. As far as I was concerned, it was the size of a laundry basket. I was a small child at the time, and I could actually fit into it. I thought this was wonderful that Christmas came in a basket. It was filled with absolutely everything: a turkey, a ham, a whole smoked salmon, and this big, beautiful stollen. Many years ago, a friend of mine, someone who was I worked with, who then became a friend of mine, gave me a Fortnum's hamper as a Christmas present, and it is absolutely a treasured item in my house. And I thought this Christmas, having thought about Great Uncle George, I would go on the Fortnum's hamper site and have a look to see how much those hampers would be. Bearing in mind they've kept up with inflation, but let's just say they would be a month of my wage. And he had one of these every Christmas from his employers when he retired. My great aunt Eva was very protective of the contents of that hamper, and she did not like to share with anybody. Uncle George would sneak me salmon trimmings as he was cutting up that side of smoked salmon and slicing it thinly. And then when the Solon got to the point where Auntie Eva didn't want to eat any more because it was the drag ends of the stollen, he would cut it thinly, toast it whenever Auntie Eva wasn't looking, and feed me a piece of it. Meanwhile, those Leverkusen, the heart-shaped or star-shaped beautiful gingerbreads decorated with icing are an absolute love treat throughout the Advent season. Strictly speaking, they're a gingerbread, but it's so much more than that. So we talk about gingerbreads, that there's gingerbread which is a biscuit and you build houses out of them. I actually have a recipe for modelling gingerbread. Then we have gingerbread that is a cake that you make, and it comes out quite dry, but you let it mature for about a week and it becomes soft and squidgy. Us in the UK will remember McVitie's Jamaican ginger cake as something from childhood. It was spicy and rich and molasses flavoured. And then you have these, and these are a yeasted dish. Although if you pop over to my blog, you'll see that I've linked out to a recipe from BBC Good Food, which might just be for you if you're not up to doing yeasted doughs. This one has ordinary raising agents in it. But they have this soft and spongy open texture, and it's just chewy and it's rich and just lovely. Both of these baked goods have appearances on Christmas table in many German-speaking regions, and including in parts of the UK, thanks to Germany's lasting influence on Christmas traditions, especially with the fact that we have Christmas markets that have been going in this country, some of them for over 25 years. They make a show. And also in the UK, with the rise of Aldi and Lidl, they've normalised bringing in German traditional baked goods at Christmas, which I think is wonderful as a way of sharing these traditions and discovering fantastic foods. So, Let's go down to the UK. Christmas pudding, mince pies, and a bit more. So here we have our own set of Christmas food traditions. Many of us remember our parents rushing to the dining table with a Christmas pudding that was on fire, where it's been smothered in brandy. Um, there may have been those parents that were more adventurous and would heat the brandy first to try and make it ignite. Otherwise, there might be quite a lot of swearing in the kitchen as they were trying to drop matches onto the pudding to make it flame. And you see the fire circling round the pudding as it burnt through the vapours. Rich and full of dried fruits, Christmas pudding is a traditional steam dish, although these days it's often microwaved. It's served with a flourish of brandy butter or cream. I always remember when one time my mum said to my sister-in-law, would you like custard, cream or ice cream? To which Sue replied, yes, please. And that started a tradition with my mum that you could actually have all three if you wanted it. And I think that's quite a reasonable idea to have in your Christmas pudding. Stir Up Sunday, which falls on the last Sunday before Advent, is traditionally when the Christmas puddings are made along with the Christmas cake. This is because Christmas puddings have to be made in advance and then wrapped up and let to mature for Christmas. Puddings take around 8 hours to steam when they're first cooked, and that's not practical to do on Christmas Day. So making them early and reheating them for a few hours by steaming is immensely practical. Now, if you're coming up to Advent, that's last weekend, this weekend, so the time to make your Christmas pudding, and you just don't have the will to steam for 8 hours on your hob. If you've got a slow cooker, fill it half full with water, put a saucer upside down and stick your Christmas pudding on top of there. Steam it in the slow cooker on high. We've done that a couple of years running, and it's a really good way to just have it bubbling away in the kitchen. Keep an eye on the amount of water in there to make sure there's just enough in to keep it bubbling away. And you can also reheat it in the slow cooker as well on Christmas Day for about 2 to 4 hours, depending on the size of your pudding. Now, these days, because there's so few of us that make them at home, we'll often see shops advertising mature Christmas puddings, with some even stating that they are over 12 months old. It makes me laugh that in an age where we're so worried about food hygiene, that we actually think it's wonderful to make something and stick it in a cupboard for 12 months and then recook it. But there you go. But why stop with a classic Christmas pudding? Every year on the new Christmas adverts, the posher supermarkets, well, actually not just the posher ones, because even the more entry-level supermarkets like to have their top range items they're going to offer you. They will come up and tell you about the fantastic new ones you can get. There's one called Partridge in a Pear Tree, which has a pear in the middle of the pudding, and another one had a pear inside of a candied satsuma. Another had a chocolate orange pudding. I mean, it's so many out there. And pudding has evolved with the centuries. Its origin actually dates back to the 14th centuries, the 1300s, where it was a type of savoury porridge made with meat and spices, and over time has become sweeter and more festive. When you think about it, we can have anything we want. I just had tomatoes yesterday in November. Now, if I wanted tomatoes when I was a kid, we would have grown them in the summer, wrapped them up when they were green and put them under the stairs, brought a few out in each week to ripen. One Christmas, we had strawberries. My brother-in-law, who was a greengrocer at the time, had got some on Christmas Eve from the market, and there was enough to have one each. These days we just assume you have strawberries anytime you want because they're grown all year round, or we can access them through importation. So to have a pudding that is full of dried fruit, it harks back to the times when you preserve things by drying. Food was seasonal. I have a wonderful cookbook by Prue Leith, which I have for many years, which is her seasonal cookbook, and it goes back to eating things at the time they're available, and the idea of seasonal food. So to have food that you had dried and stored and put away for winter was to make it special. Now, equally iconic are mince pies, and they do have a fascinating history because just like Christmas pudding, they once were a savoury dish made with mincemeat, suet, and dried fruits. Now, one of the things that goes back to this period when these were commonly eaten, which is around those 14 and 1500s, is that spices were expensive. We think of the Silk Route when the spices came out of China and out of India. If you had spices, you had money. So to have a spice dish at Christmas was to show off dried fruit and high calorie items that you were eating because you could, not because you needed to eat. And these make them a status symbol or a treat. It's why we still think of chocolate or a satsuma at Christmas as being special, because it's that idea that you can have that at that time. And it is a gift that's out of where you have to consume calories purely to live. So these savoury pies have moved forward. Now, there's been a tradition in England of having minced meat pies with other things in them because beef was expensive. So there was a period when oysters were very, very cheap. I know this sounds very strange. And so minced beef was made to go further by adding oysters to it, whereas now it's the other way round. Oysters are the expensive thing, and you add a few of those to your minced beef to have your beef and oyster pie. At Christmas, I will do the classic pigs in blankets, because no Christmas dinner is complete without a pigs in blanket. But I will also do devils on horseback, which are bacon wrapped prunes. They plump up and have that lovely savoury bacony flavour that goes with them. Their counterpart is an angel on horseback, which is a bacon wrapped oyster. I unfortunately have developed an allergy to mussels and oysters a few years ago. Another forbidden food in our family, but hubby adores them. So for Christmas, I will often take some smoked oysters and do him some angels on horseback, and then I have the devils on horseback to go with them. And again, it's that sweet and savoury flavours that come out at Christmas, the hark back to a time where you just had anything you want to show off the status and the unusual foods. By the 18th century, mince pies had evolved into a sweet spice fruit filling that we know today, and many still believe that having one on Christmas Eve can bring you good luck. So if you're planning on having a mince pie on Christmas Eve, I hope it does bring you fantastic luck. Traditionally, they were a star or a crescent shape, symbolising the Star of Bethlehem and the three wise men's journey. I think food brings people together and closer through their common bonding of eating. It's said that to break bread with people means that you have to sit together closely, and it's closer than you would be at a rapier's distance. That's why shaking hands brings you in close, because you can't really stab somebody with your sword. That was the idea why shaking hands showed it was a truce. So sitting together and breaking bread and having food with the people you love means that you're there in companionship. And for me, even though I find sprouts a bit hit and miss, we always have them every Christmas because they evoke my mum. And I think putting the memories of the people that aren't with you to the food that you love, so that they're with you as you do things, is really important. I've always adored a Pimm's number 6 cup. It's a brandy-based Pimm's, unlike the gin-based summer fruit cup, which is number 1. And you have it with hot apple juice. And I've had it twice with my sister-in-law, my husband's sister. Um, and now when I think of that, I think of her. It's intertwined. Those memories, the smells, the tastes, they bring back the people we love and the people we miss, but in a way that makes us happy, because every time we sat with them and we ate, we enjoyed those times. So choosing a recipe that honours a loved one or includes something that brings back a memory of a visit to a wonderful place or friends you miss is a great way of having them near you at this time. So as we gather with our friends and family, or for those of you even who are on your own or working, ha- have something that's special with those savouring those flavours of different cultures, connecting with the wider world, honouring your own cherished traditions. Our Christmas table becomes not just a place for food, but a celebration of the unity and joy that comes from sharing what we hold dear, no matter where we come from. So why not get a Christmas pie out, it's pie out this Christmas Eve, um, as I will be doing, and perhaps some glühwein, or I will share near Christmas fabulous recipe I've got for spiced cranberry juice. Um, and think of those that you love and you miss, and those that you hold dear. Have a great time. Speak to you soon.